you issued the boil water alerts a week ago now. What have you seen in town since?
Certainly, the boil water alert we issued last Thursday, so you're right, it's a week ago, and the community's been very responsive. Obviously, they prefer it wasn't in place, but the community's responded. They're boiling their water. They're being very sensible with what they're doing. They are buying more bottled water from the supermarkets, but really the community has responded, and I really haven't heard a huge amount of negativity, apart from the fact that they prefer it wasn't in place, but they also understand that we've got these extreme events happening at the moment. The 2019 droughts obviously left a lot more carcasses, more fecal matter along the riverbanks of the river. Now we're getting these flood events, and we're getting different flood events, not just the Macquarie River, which is the main river in Dubbo coming up, but also some of the feeder rivers are getting up much higher than they have in the past, which is bringing a lot more of that debris along the river. So I think the community's been very understanding so far.
Mm-mm. Uh, it has been quite a 3-year period for you in particular. You mentioned buying more water from the supermarkets. There was a brief kind of shortage in town. Was that a bit of panic buying that resolved itself? What did you see?
Yes, so certainly we were a bit worried when we were issuing that boil water alert that it might be like toilet paper and COVID-19. The advantage we had in this scenario was that COVID-19 was obviously affecting the entire nation. This was only affecting one city. So we did actually, when we issued that boil water alert, we did actually contact the supermarkets, and we recommended or suggested that they might need to buy more bottled water. So they did respond quite quickly. So the shortage of bottled water really was only the first day, maybe the first 2 days. But now when you walk into the supermarkets, they've usually got some pallets near the front of the supermarket that's got lots of bottled water there. So the supplies of that are quite good at the moment. And again, people are accustomed to be able to boil that water and use it. People have gotten into the habit of boiling some water, filling up some containers, waiting until they cool down a bit and then putting them in the fridge maybe. So I think people are quite adept at using the water in the way it needs to be used at the moment.
Mm. Now, going beyond individual households, how are schools and childcares and healthcare facilities coping with the boil water alert?
The fortunate part is that it's occurred in school holidays, so schools haven't had to adapt to anything because at the moment their students aren't there. We did get some bottled water out to some of the childcare facilities, some of the places that might need it. So they've been actually okay, and I haven't really heard any negative feedback from any of those type of organisations, childcare, aged care facilities. Again, they've responded, and we've contacted them by the phone, not just relying on the media to get the information out there. We've contacted them by phone, talked to them, and helped out wherever we can. So again, they've been quite good at adapting.
Mm. Can you give me a bit of an idea of what kind of matter is contaminating the water supply and how much of the water supply is affected?
So the issue here is something that I didn't really know, a term that I'd be using only a few weeks ago, that the nephthalmetric turbidity unit, which is a measure of the turbidity of water, and that particular unit has to be, according to New South Wales Health, below 0.5 of the water that's coming out of a water treatment plant. Now, we normally have that level sitting around about 0.2. Unfortunately, just over a week ago, we noticed with the extra turbidity of the water coming into the water treatment plant, we were putting some processes in place, but we had it sneak up to about 0.52. That triggered us to have communications with New South Wales Health and work with them, which then ended up in the boil water alert. The process of actually measuring the turbidity of water is a fairly blunt instrument because what you're really concerned about is crypto, and that's the concern here, is that if you've got water that's got turbidity above 0.5, it doesn't necessarily, but it can have some cryptosporidium in that water. Obviously, we don't want to be distributing crypto around the community. We don't actually have the technology to test for crypto in our water treatment plant, and that's generally across the board, across water treatment plants. I think there's only one water facility in the state which actually can test for crypto, which is in Sydney. It's both slow and expensive to actually test for that. So turbidity is used as a way of testing because if the water is more turbid, it can be hiding pathogens such as cryptosporidium. So we've actually seen no additional outbreaks. We actually met with New South Wales Health, well, we're meeting with them every day, but met with them specifically about this particular issue, and there's been no cryptosporidium in Dubbo, in the health district in Dubbo, since January, which again, you will get some crypto sometimes in the community. So the turbidity can be hiding crypto. In this case, we really are taking a very cautious approach. We don't really be distributing water to the community that potentially could have crypto. Therefore, that's why the boil water alert is on.
Mm. Have you heard of any reports of increased illness in town, any cryptosporidium transferring to people via the water?
Not at this stage, no. And there's a couple of parts of that. Again, I think people responded quite well to the boil water alert. The risk, even if people did drink the water, and I'm not recommending they do, but if they did drink the water without boiling it, it is still a very low risk. There was only a period of time there of about 10 hours that we were producing water that was above that turbidity level of 0.5. It was only just above that. But then we've got reservoirs, a number of reservoirs around the city. So that water was feeding into the reservoirs that had non-contaminated water. So it was already diluted. And then after that 10-hour period, we were then feeding back water below that 0.5 turbidity level. So the amount of potentially contaminated water in our reservoirs is minimal, and that's where we're working with New South Wales Health at the moment to get to a point where we can lift that boil water alert once they're satisfied the dilution level is low enough. But no, in answer to your question, no additional cases of illness, no additional cases of diarrhoea or of coughing or of crypto specifically.
Now, tell me about those reservoirs. How are you dealing with the situation? Like, what measures are you taking to ensure that the water supply is okay? Are you flushing them?
So we're doing a number of things. We've got certain levels in those reservoirs that we need to maintain a minimum to be able to maintain pressure in the network. There are three main reservoirs that the water treatment plant feeds out to. They're called Bunanyong, Newtown and Rifle Range Road. They're the three main reservoirs. So those reservoirs then feed to smaller reservoirs downstream in the network. What we've been doing is working with New South Wales Health and with the Department of Public Works to actually do some calculations to say when we have the water come down to a certain level and we are flushing some of that water out into our stormwater system to drain some of those quicker than they normally would drain, and then obviously continuing to fill those back up again, and then doing some calculations with those government departments to get to a dilution level of 0.1%, so the risk factor of crypto being in that water is incredibly low.
Tell me, the fact that you have to flush and drain the reservoirs using other water, is that putting any strain on your supplies?
Not at this stage. The water treatment plant is capable of producing a lot more water than we're using at the moment because we've obviously got to cater to summer usage. In winter, the actual usage of the water is not anywhere near as high. So the water treatment plant has the capability to produce a lot more water than we would be using at the moment. So by flushing that water out and refilling it, it's basically doing what we would like residents to do in terms of using that water, but they're never going to use as much in winter as they would be in summer. So it's not really putting a strain on the supply. We're producing water at a level that we can just keep maintaining that water being filled up and keep the pressure, because people are still using the water for having a shower, for washing their dishes, for washing their clothes, and the water that they need to produce to actually be able to boil it in the first place before they then drink it. So they still need that pressure, that reasonable level of pressure to do all those normal things with.
When do you expect you'll be able to lift that boil alert?
That is an excellent question, and I don't know the exact answer to that. It will actually be in a staged process, and that's what we're working with New South Wales Health and Public Works at the moment about, because what we'll do is we'll stage those three main reservoirs. They've actually got certain households that are fed directly from those reservoirs. They'll be the first ones to be lifted. So there'll be a zone where we'll give the community maps and information about the zone that they'll be able to start using it. And then it'll take a few more days after that before we get to the next set of reservoirs, which will obviously be downstream. So they'll have a delay of a few days. So I don't want this to be, in terms of confidence from the public, wait until we do say lift the boil water alert. But I expect by next Monday, those first reservoirs will be talking to people about either that day or the time frame that we're lifting that boil water alert, and then the rest of the reservoirs a few days after that.
So this could go on for a couple of weeks before you start lifting restrictions?
No, I'm hopeful that early next week we'll be lifting those restrictions on that first zone or the first zones, and then the water to flow down to those next reservoirs should only be a few more days after that. So I would be hopeful, but again, wait from the community perspective, wait until we tell the community that it's definitely lifted, but I would be hopeful by the end of next week we'll have all of Dubbo's drinking water back to normal for residents.
How many people are affected? It's Dubbo and surrounds, right?
You've got Dubbo and the villages of Dubbo. So you've got places such as Firgrove, Wongarba, Newmundry, Ballymore, Mogrigai and Brocklehurst. They're all fed via pipelines from the main water treatment facility. We've also got some places a bit further afield. So Geary's got their own water treatment facility. Wellington's got their own water treatment facility. So both Geary and Wellington are not impacted, but Dubbo and all those villages that I've just mentioned are affected. So that's over 40,000 people.
Mm-mm. And in terms of the length of this water boil alert, how does it fit in with alerts that you have had in the past? Is it about a similar length? Is it longer?
Well, it's been very rare for us to have a boil water alert. We managed to find that back in 2016 we had a boil water alert that went for about 2 weeks. But before that, we struggled to find any boil water alert with our new water treatment facility, and we installed that in 2006. We spent $23 million putting a new water treatment facility in Dubbo to treat the growing population of Dubbo. So we haven't been able to find any other boil water alert from the Dubbo water treatment facility from 2006 through to now, apart from that one in 2016.
In 2019, with the drought, the opposite problem to the one currently, and the contamination by carcasses, did you think in 2019 that you would now be dealing with another alert for precisely the opposite situation?
Well, it's a tricky question because I wasn't on council in 2019, so I wasn't thinking about what might happen with the water treatment facility. But certainly, you're right. There has been a dramatic change there from 2019 when the council of the day introduced some water restrictions because obviously there was very low water levels in the river. And part of the resilience that we're building, obviously we've got climate change and we've got to make sure that we're accommodating for changing conditions as we go forward. One of the things that we've been working towards is being able to draw more water from our bore network. We do have bores at the moment. We can use water from those bores, but we don't have enough capacity from our current bore network to be able to use 100% of bore water for our community. We have been building that, and that was mainly from a drought proofness. But in this scenario, if we could have taken all that water from the bores, we would actually be in a scenario where we wouldn't have needed to worry about that turbidity of water coming from the river because we would have been able to use the bore water. We don't normally want to use 100% bore water because it's actually more expensive to treat bore water to get it to a drinking standard. So you normally do a mixture. We normally take water from the river mainly and a small amount of bore water and mix them together. In this scenario, knowing there was additional turbidity in the river, we could have changed over to bores. And I suggest that by the next time something like this happens, we'll have improved or increased our bore capacity to the point that maybe we'll be able to get to that stage of 100% from the bores.
Now, you may have covered some of this next question, but in terms of like infrastructure or water security planning more broadly, what, if anything, do you think is the missing piece in the puzzle? You've talked about the water treatment plant a few times, and it's obviously providing a great deal of security for Dubbo. But is there anything else that you feel the area needs in the event of something like this happening again?
Yeah, probably the bore system that I did talk about, the ability to switch over to that bore network and also change what we do in terms of the treatment of that water to accommodate the fact that we're using bore water rather than river water. That's certainly one. We've also been having discussions with Water New South Wales and various departments from the government, including New South Wales Health, to talk about the different ways we might be able to treat that water, given the fact that this sort of scenario, having droughts, having floodwaters, that switch between the two and more extremes of both, then I think we'll be seeing more of that. So we need to make sure we put a system in place that can accommodate that. Our first priority is to get back to the stage of getting clean water to our residents, and then we'll do some further analysis on that. And the bore water is a simple one, but there might be some other changes we could make with our water treatment facility that could handle water that's more turbid. Because when this was put in 2006, we didn't expect the turbidity of the water coming down the river would ever get to the level that it's at now.
Well, that's fascinating. And what needs to be put in place for you to have the capacity to suddenly switch to 100% bore water if needs be? Is that something that Water New South Wales has to approve? Does it have to be, okayed by someone, or is it a question of infrastructure?
It's a question of cost mainly. We've got to basically have more capabilities to take more water from the bores that are in and around Dubbo. We've got some capacity there now, but we need to go further afield to go into more parts of that bore network. And there are bores available, but it costs money to buy that land or to buy any licenses we might need and to actually have a pipeline to take it from those bores through to the water treatment facility. So the potential is there to do it. It just costs money.
Mm-mm. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think that really covers it all. I think that gives listeners a pretty good overview of the processes in place. And really one of the main things is just that responsibility for a council to make sure we're delivering clean drinking water to our community and the ongoing analysis of that to make sure in this scenario we did pick up very quickly because we do real-time monitoring of that water. So the system worked even though we weren't able to keep delivering clean water. We were able to make sure there wasn't a major health outbreak by that constant monitoring of that water quality.
Thank you so much, Matthew Dickerson.